sacred day to you this day of your time. How are you all? All right. All right. We thank you once again for the allowance of this transmission at this time and for the co-creation of this interaction. We will begin this transmission by reminding everyone that the title is the Earth Flat? Now, it is interesting, it is fascinating that a subject such as this that occurred in your society so long ago should come up again at this time and seem to be spreading so prevalently throughout your society for those who are in any way, shape, or form interested in such subjects. It is all over your internet and being discussed with great seriousness by many people. So, there are two parts to this response. Now, we recognize, again, that nothing we say in any way, shape, or form insists that anyone must believe what we have to say. That's not why we share this information with you. But we have our point of view. You can take it or you can leave it. But this is what we will say. First of all, we will begin with a physical discussion of this concept, and then we will move to a metaphysical explanation of why we perceive this conversation seems to be so prevalent in your society at this time. So, first and foremost, we will just be blunt. The Earth is a sphere. Period. Now, the idea is easy to understand if, again, you understand at least some degree of physics or celestial mechanics. You have observed, most of you, the idea of your own astronauts in what you call microgravity or zero-G, and you have seen them playing with liquids. When the liquids are floating freely with no gravity, you see that the liquid forms a sphere. If that liquid were allowed to cool down and solidify, it would remain a sphere. All of the different pressures of the molecular structures, the molecular interactions, and so forth, electric fields, electromagnetic fields, are equally spread out in a sphere in that way. The liquid floating freely, you never see it turn into a disk, ever. You always see it turn into a sphere. So when planetary formation in a solar system begins, and you know that most of the planets at their early stages are molten, liquid, then their natural tendency for a variety of reasons will be to form that sphere, just as the small amounts of liquid do in your astronauts' experiments in zero-G. And when the planets cool, again, they will maintain their spherical form, their dimensional volumetric form. Now, an experiment, a very simple experiment, aside from the idea of seeing liquid floating around in a spherical shape in zero-G, a simple experiment that has already been performed on your planet that demonstrates that your planet is not flat, very simply and very obviously. And this is something you can find on your internet. This experiment was conducted in the following way. Some of you may or may not be familiar with this already. There were people that went to the shore of a lake. You know, many of you, that when you stand on the shore of a lake, if the winds are calm, a lake will appear very, very flat. They brought with them a very powerful laser. A laser beam, as again, many of you know, will shoot out in an extremely straight line. Therefore, what they did is they set up the laser on the shore. They had a boat in the water, not too far from shore, just perhaps several dozen feet, several dozen yards at most. They then turned the laser on, and on the boat had a specific target that the laser could shine on. So when they turned the laser on, you could see the bright dot of the laser on the target on the side of the boat. You could see right there that the laser being parallel to the lake and being very straight, and the lake appearing to be very flat, the laser and the lake were in parallel. Then they decided to take the boat 3 miles from shore. That's all, just 3 miles from shore. And turn the laser on again. The dot now was 6 feet higher. This means that because the laser hasn't changed, the lake hasn't changed, the only thing that could possibly have changed is that the boat is lower. But it's still on the water. To the people on the boat, to the people on the shore, the lake still looks flat. The only explanation is that the boat is lower, which means it is curving away over the horizon slightly. And thus the laser, not having changed, is now, when it first hitting this, is now, as the boat lowers, hitting a higher point. This is proof the boat is lowering. This is proof the boat is curving down over the horizon. Very simple experiment. The irony is that many people on your planet who are discussing the idea that the Earth is flat are commenting, are proposing that the Earth is actually flat, and that the fact that it seems spherical is an illusion. Just the opposite is true. The Earth is a sphere, and the fact that it seems flat is the illusion. So, it's a little bit backwards. Now, that's the physics of it, the physical side of it, and again, easy to demonstrate. Even though the lake looks flat, you can easily prove it is not. It is following the curve of the Earth because of gravity. And the boat is lowering below the horizon, hence the raising of the laser dot, because the laser didn't move and the lake didn't change. The only thing that changed was the boat going lower over the horizon. Now, the metaphysics of this, the metaphysical reason that this is coming up, is as follows from our perspective. Many people are now exploring the concept of expanding their consciousness. As you expand your consciousness, you begin to realize that time and space and physical reality are illusions. They're projections of consciousness. They're not really solid things. The idea, therefore, is that many people are beginning to sense this in a very strong way. The idea, in a sense, that because physical reality, space and time are not real, that they are projections of consciousness. The idea to most of you of a projection is something that you see projected on a wall that's flat, a flat picture. In a sense, holographically speaking, a hologram is flat. But you can create the illusion of three-dimensionality, of volume in it, by your angle of viewing, by how you illuminate it. So the issue is that while many people are sensing truly that physical reality, in a sense, metaphorically, isn't really solid, is in a sense flat as a projection, unreal, in other words, they're simply applying too physical of an interpretation to this idea, which again is ironic because the reason they're sensing that is an energy one, a spiritual one, and yet they're interpreting the spiritual causation of recognizing physical reality as being quote-unquote flat and unreal as if it were literally true physically. That's why that's happening. They simply are mixing up and confusing the idea of an energetic projection of consciousness with something that's actually happening in the physical reality. But by the definition itself of physical reality, it's volumetric as an experience. You experience the idea of height and width and depth. Therefore, the idea of what might be a flat projection energetically, holographically, still plays out, is still interpreted by consciousness in physical terms as a volume. So even though it may energetically seem to be a disk, physically a disk has to turn into a sphere. You saw this also presented in some of your films, especially one that recently depicted the concept of what does a black hole actually look like? Many people think of the idea still on your planet that a black hole is, in a sense, a hole, dimensionless, flat, a disk. But it's not. It is something that expresses itself, at least to some degree, in your physical dimensionality. Therefore, a black hole is also spherical. If it weren't, you would not really be able to perceive it. Because things that are truly two-dimensional are not really easily perceivable in your reality. You can see two-dimensional aspects or parts of things, such as your own shadow on the ground, or like we said, a projection of an image on a wall. But you have to understand that the projection is not just the flat image on the wall. The projection coming from a projector is a cone of light that you only see the bottom of on the wall. So you have to understand that anything that is created holographically in a metaphysical, spiritual, energetic sense, in a consciousness sense, by definition is going to present itself volumetrically and three-dimensionally in your experience of physical reality. Therefore, the Earth, in physical terms, is a sphere, even though in energetic, spiritual, non-physical terms, it can be considered flat because it's not real. It's just a projection. So clarity would be important to bring into the conversation so that people can understand that, in a sense, both sides are correct. It's just that they're correct only in a certain context, not across the line from non-physical to physical. These are two different ways of interpreting the idea of the projection of consciousness. And that clarity can be brought into the conversation to allow everyone to know that they are beginning to perceive reality in an important way, that it is a projection of consciousness, that it isn't really real, that it isn't really around you, that you don't really live in it, that physical reality exists within you. As we have said previously during some of these transmissions, the idea of evolving, the idea of raising your frequency, the idea of ascension, the idea of becoming more sensitive, more aware of what you really are and what physical reality experience really is that you finally get to the point where you realize that you actually are the dimension you previously thought you existed in. So, to put it in other terms, most of you still think on the planet that your spirit is inside your body. No, your body is inside your spirit. It's just that your spiritual focus is narrowed down to the parameters of the physical experience. But when you expand your concept of spirit and consciousness, it's that you expand beyond the parameters of the physical focus. You include the body within the greater consciousness that you are. It's a part of you. It's an experience within you. But it's not that the spirit is actually leaving the body. It's just expanding beyond it to include it as part of the experience, but it also becomes so much more than just the experience of the physical personality. Does that make sense? All right. We thank you for allowing us to explain this at this time. Other discussions can be had on this subject during this or any other transmission. But we invite you now to ask your questions and allow us, if we may, to be of service to you.